Well, the Prime Minister has pounced on the ACT's 50% vaccination rate in his escalating brawl with Anthony Albanese over Labor's proposal to pay people $300 to get the injection.
The people of the ACT haven't needed a cash splash from the Leader of the Opposition. The people of the ACT, they didn't need the vote of no confidence that the Labor Party leader wants to put out there in their ability to get vaccines.
Part of a spirited question time yesterday. Peter Van Onselen is TEN's political editor and a columnist with The Australian. Peter, hello there.
Good morning, Fran.
Well, the Prime Minister's really doubled down on his criticism of Labor's plan to pay people to get the vaccine. But then Lieutenant General John Frewen, who's in charge of the rollout, didn't rule out financial incentives yesterday. He said we will look at all sorts of positive alternatives. There's cash, there's the idea of lotteries. All these things are being discussed. So has this undermined the Prime Minister's line of attack against Anthony Albanese?
I think it certainly has to some extent. It certainly showed that he's closed-minded when Labor comes up with an idea, I think would be the way to put it. I mean, Paul Kelly, the Chief Medical Officer, as I'm sure you know, back in May, he said he was open to various incentives as well, which presumably would therefore have included cash incentives. The point here, though, is that the Labor proposal was never about them having a policy that they were going to take to the next election, obviously, because the hope is that everyone's vaccinated well and truly before then. It's about them putting forward something that ideally would be constructively looked at by both the government and the opposition. Now, Liberals will say they didn't do that. They played politics with it by the way that they announced it, notwithstanding some of the rhetoric suggesting that they wanted to try to have a bipartisan approach. However, Labor would understandably, I think, also make the point that, well, whenever we suggest something, whether it's behind closed doors or in open, the government's instant reaction is one of stubbornness and saying, no, we won't do that. So I think the arguments are pretty lame as a reason not to do it, saying that people are already vaccinated. We know not enough are, even if there are decent numbers in the ACT. And not only that, Fran, but people who have already been vaccinated, particularly people from lower socioeconomic groups that have done the right thing or gone after AstraZeneca, they would be rightly annoyed if this wasn't universally applied to everyone, not just as an incentive for those who are yet to do it.
It's the simplicity of Anthony Albanese's idea, $300 to everyone who gets vaccinated, that is part of its appeal, but also leaves it open, I think, to the government's attack, the $6 billion price tag. There's some mutterings amongst Labor MPs, I gather, that this proposal was a captain's call by Anthony Albanese. He didn't consult many of his senior colleagues. Is this just an effort for Anthony Albanese to cut through and make sure the focus this week is on the vaccine rollout, where Labor believes, he certainly believes, the government, the Prime Minister is vulnerable?
I certainly think that it was designed to steal the whip hand at the start of the return of Parliament, but I do also think that it was a genuine idea that deserved more than a cursory glance and to be swiped away by the government. Just on the finance thing, very quickly, I don't think that the government these days, the coalition in government, have any leg to stand on when it comes to spending. I mean, whether you think it's fair or not, they've spent like drunken sailors. Maybe that's been good, maybe it hasn't. But that argument has shifted, I think, going forward in terms of economic management and use of debt to finance initiatives. For Anthony Albanese, this, I think, is a reasonable captain's call. I know there's been some speculation that he didn't discuss it with his health spokesperson, Mark Butler. My understanding is that that's not true because he and Mark Butler are incredibly factionally close as well as personally close. But I do understand that it certainly wasn't something that went across Shadow Cabinet. But I don't think too many people in Shadow Cabinet would be annoyed by that because this is one of those rare moments where a leader doesn't need to be consultative and wants to have something that they can throw out on the government. And it's not a bad idea.
And just briefly, Peter, the irony, if you like, we mentioned yesterday the Prime Minister attacking Labor for spending like drunken sailors when, you know, the government's been under pressure for spending, not just COVID spending. Most people understand that and most economic minds were recommending it, but things like the sports rorts or the car park rorts. And, you know, yesterday journalists had a chance to question Alan Tudge about the so-called commuter car park rorts. That's that $600 million project. He was the infrastructure minister. He says he had nothing to do with the hit list of top 20 marginal seats that was drawn up to guide where the money was spent. We know about that list because the Audit Office has told the inquiry. So if it wasn't the minister, what was it? Does that leave us with the Prime Minister's office again?
Well, that's a good question. It may lead it back to the Prime Minister's office, or it may be a case of see no evil, hear no evil by the Minister with what is going on amongst advisors within their office. Another reason that it's a problem that ministerial responsibility isn't what it once was when advisors do certain things and ministers are better off not knowing about it. Either way, though, it doesn't change the end result, does it, Fran? Which is that this is pork barrelling. It looks like rorting as far as I'm concerned. The Auditor General isn't far off the same conclusion, and it's the kind of thing voters hate.
Sure is. Peter, thank you very much.
Good to chat.
Peter Van Onselen is Professor of Politics at Griffith University and the University of WA.